The chair now lays out House Bill 3324 and recognizes Representative Moody to explain Chairman Coleman's bill.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, happy to lay this out on behalf of Chairman Coleman. This bill amends our hate crime statute and proposes to add gender identity or expression to the list of enumerated hate crimes covered under our penal code currently. Back in 2001, the Texas legislature passed the James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Act. The act allows trial courts to impose stiffer penalties for crimes committed due to bias against victims' real or perceived race, religion, color, sex, disability, sexual preference, age, or national origin. There are no similar protections currently under the law available for victims of crimes caused because of bias against the victim's gender identity or expression. Gender identity or expression should be added to the current list of attributes because, like the current listed attributes, it is a universal trait that has historically been the basis for widespread and systemic violence in our culture. That is pretty much what this bill would do, and is a one-line change to the Texas Penal Code. And I'll answer any questions if anybody has them, and reserve the right to close.
Members, are there specific questions with respect to House Bill 3324? If not, at this time, the chair recognizes that Representative Moody has reserved the right to close on behalf of Chairman Coleman with respect to House Bill 3324. At this time, the chair calls, looks like Nell Gaither? Nell Gaither, representing herself, wishing to come forward to testify for House Bill 3324. If you would, please state your name for the record, who you're here representing, and then what your position is with respect to House Bill 3324, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Nell Gaither, and I'm speaking for myself on my own behalf in favor of or for House Bill 3324. We had a young man who was here to testify earlier tonight, but because of his transportation situation, he's a student, he needed to get back to Houston, so because we thought his story was important, I offered to go ahead and read his testimony that he had written out. So this is Lance Reyna's testimony that he had prepared.
This is what I would do, is because it's not here, you can provide us a copy and we can circulate it to them.
But don't read it?
Well, you're here testifying on your behalf.
Okay.
And so if you want to paraphrase from that or just read it as your statement or hand it out to us as opposed to you saying that you're reading on behalf of someone else, because that's not the person who's testifying.
Okay, so that won't, that's not allowed.
I would rather you give it to us so that we can have it, or if you want, you can.
As part of the record.
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll get copies of it to you, I think, so that we do that. And all I have is this, but we can make copies and hand it to you?
Yes, please.
Okay. Then I'll go ahead and state what I was going to originally. I think I can do it fairly quickly. I volunteer for a healthcare program that's specifically for transgender persons, and each person that comes into our program as part of the intake process is to fill out a survey, and part of that survey is to ask about hate crimes or crimes because of gender identity. And it's not a real formal survey, but it does give us some kind of preliminary data for local. This program is focused on the Dallas area, but we actually see patients from a 5-state area. So we've had people as far as El Paso, Austin, the eastern border, and the Red River attending our program regularly. And we have one of our questions on the form is: Have you ever been a crime victim, abuse victim, been assaulted, denied services, access, or harassed due to your gender expression or identity? And so we have about a 20% rate of yes on that they have been a victim of a crime in that way, and so I'd just like to read some of their responses. I was robbed and assaulted because of my gender identity. I was physically assaulted after a man learned I was transgender. I experienced verbal and property abuse due to my gender identity. My father assaulted me due to my identity. I was beat up in a parking lot. I experienced a road rage incident because of my gender identity. I was abused as a child and a teenager. I have received threats. I had a near rape experience. I have been subjected to family violence because of my identity. I suffered physical abuse and bullying in childhood, both at school and elsewhere. I was stabbed multiple times while being harassed by a gang. And I do want to point out this question is specifically directed to something that they experienced because of their identity. So anyway, I'll close since I'm out of time. I'd just like to say that this is a very simple change to the law, and extending the James Byrd Hate Crimes Act to cover gender identity would recognize and make public this issue of gender bias and gender identity-based bias crimes, and we hope it would help address social stigma against transgender persons. So I'll close there, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to address them.
Questions, members? Thank you for your testimony. Chair now calls Marshall Mitchell, representing Secular Legislative Action Committee, wishing to come forward to testify for House Bill 3324. Chair then calls Lance Reina, represent.
Who I was reading for, so she's not here now.
Megan Stabler with the Human Rights Campaign, wishing to come forward to testify for House Bill 3324.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Megan Stabler. I'm a National Board of Director for the Human Rights Campaign. The Human Rights Campaign is the largest LGBT civil rights organization with 1.7 million members. 97,000 of us live here in Texas, including myself. So on behalf of all of our members, I really would like to encourage you to vote in favor of this bill. Leaving people with gender identity and expression behind is something that's not good for Texas. We face discrimination both in our workplace because we're not protected, but also in our daily lives because we're not protected. So I implore the committee to protect the most vulnerable amongst us, which is us, by extending the hate crimes protections that you have to cover gender identity and expression. As a Texan, I believe that we must take a strong stand against violence committed against our neighbors for simply being themselves. I was diagnosed with gender identity disorder when I was young. I knew when I was 5 years old that I was different. I traveled through life. I became a software executive. I tried the British military for a period of time. I did everything I could do to be the true me as a male me. I couldn't be that male me. I nearly completed suicide here in Texas. I knew that I couldn't go through with that, and I had to do something about it. So I transitioned. I went from male to female. My testimony, as you have it, is basically outlaying some of the reasons for the bill, but I want to tell you my story itself. Because I'm not sure that you all have met somebody that is transgender or a transsexual woman like myself. I lived with this since I was 5 years old. And I know I'm different. And I know I look different to some of you. And we joked about cats and dogs a few moments ago when we were down there as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. But every day that we walk down a street, or I'm with my partner and my 1-year-old child that we conceived through the generous donation from a sperm donor, I worry about the impact that my fellow Texans can have on me. I worry about those people that have a religious conviction against me as a person of faith myself, who just from being physically different, from maybe having a look that is female but having a voice that can be male or at least presumed to be different, can have on somebody to actually create some sort of bias towards me when I'm on a street here in Austin, which is the oasis of Texas as far as I'm concerned. Too many of my friends have been beaten. Too many people that I don't know but whose names I do know have been murdered. There are unsolved crimes in Houston. And unfortunately, because there is no bias in the hate crimes law itself, we can't bring these crimes, once we go for conviction, to the next level. So just like we have race, just like we have religion, I implore this committee to also include that of gender identity and expression. Now, I move beyond my written testimony. It's there on record from the Human Rights Campaign. Again, as the largest LGBT civil rights organization, I ask that you try to consider the smallest, most minority part of Texas, and that is your transgender, transsexual individuals. I'd be glad to take any questions you have.
Yes, thank you for your testimony. Representative Burnam?
I wasn't aware until recently when I was shown a letter that it's generally recommended by the medical community that has been involved in your transgender process,
yes,
that you carry identification papers for your own safety. Would you enlighten us all a little bit more about that?
Sure, not everybody does, but most of the, in fact, all of the large medical associations, the APA, the AMA, etc., have all said that this is a medical condition that is treated, that we're diagnosed early. You probably see us on TV shows, unfortunately, but most importantly, you see us on 2020. We're pilots, we're lawyers, we're business executives like myself. I've got 750 people that I support in my organization as a global technology company working in national security. Some of us do have to carry documents, and that's because we don't have clear definition and access to gender marker changes when it comes to the state of Texas. Sometimes it's difficult for us during the early stages of transition when we're under medical care, when we have a psychologist that is looking after us, a therapist that is looking after us, that is saying, you have to present as female now for a certain period of time, but we can't go and change our documents. Unfortunately, the legal process here in Texas is extremely difficult. The legal process varies from county to county. It varies from judge to judge as to who we can get to and get in front of to actually change our documents. So we go through this physical transformation under medical care and supervision to become our true, authentic selves, to become the person that we've known since a very, very early age that is being diagnosed with something called gender dysphoria. We go through all of those surgeries, and then we have to tackle our ability to change our IDs. Thankfully, the federal government makes it very easy to change Social Security, to go ahead and change our passports. But here in Texas, because we may have a gender mismatch, our driver's license may still say M. I look like this. My name has changed to Megan Stabler. I could still get pulled over by cops. So certainly some people that I believe you know have to carry documents just in case they get arrested or inquired about, even in a male restroom, for looking male. There are members, there are people in the audience that have been here today that you've probably looked at, stared at, that are male outwardly, but were born genetically female. And there are people that have been in this room, probably left this room, that externally look female, but were born male. And unfortunately, we have 0 laws here in the state of Texas. Because we don't have those laws, it makes our lives extremely difficult. Once we do transition, though, we do get to carry less and less papers, because I don't think that we're going to be pulled over. And certainly those of us that are lucky enough to afford transition, which is in excess of $75,000 at a minimum for most of us, we probably don't need to carry those documents. I'm lucky. I managed to change my DMV record. My passport has been changed. I can't change my birth certificate because I was born in England. England doesn't recognize the state of Texas when it comes to a resident who has gone through gender-confirming surgery like myself. So I can't go back to England. Not that I would. I'm a Texan. But I can't go ahead and change that. So this is just some of the difficulties, which is why we have to carry our papers with us.
Thank you. Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for your testimony. I would like to ask a couple of questions, and please understand, I really want to understand, and your story is helpful to us. When we talk about identity in this context, so that if someone has a situation like the one you described, but hasn't been able to, or for whatever reason hasn't gone through the medical procedures, under the legislation, how would that person be treated the same as one who has gone through or is going through the medical transition you're talking about? I hope that question made sense. I'm just trying to understand. It's not that we're trying to pigeonhole people, but obviously the bill is about
Sure.
classifying people and getting certain treatments. I want to understand that.
Sure.
If you can help me with that.
There is no such thing as a bad question. I'm big enough to stand up, and I testified in the U.S. Congress. I've been asked to testify in other state legislative bodies around the United States about that.
So someone who has these concerns and feels like what you described, that you had sensed, but hasn't taken any medical or steps to do anything about that, what would or should their status be? I really want to understand.
Status in terms of what, Representative?
In terms of the bill and
well, the bill itself is really adding gender identity and expression. So if I can just clarify a couple of things, if it helps.
It would help a lot.
And I appreciate you all staying here. I've testified in many state houses where I'm just left with the chairman, unfortunately. So I appreciate you all being here and actually being open to listening to it. So gender identity, I like to explain, is what's behind the brain, what's between the ears itself. Okay? You identify, and I'm making a presumption here, as a heterosexual straight male, right? But that's how you feel. That's how you were born. You feel that. You know you're a boy. You know you're this. You have sexual orientation, right, which tends to be, I'm going to use a more simplistic view, it's from the heart. It's who you're in love with, right? So sexual orientation and gender identity are two different things. And then you have gender expression. So let me give you a description of gender expression. Think of a road worker wearing a hat, boots, and a bib working on I-130 right now. Is it a guy or is it a girl? Well, if it's a female, you may think to yourself, well, that's not exactly the traditional male look of that individual. But you can have a very effeminate male, and you can have a very butch woman at the end of the day. So that's sort of an expression, how we express ourselves. And you probably all heard in the sort of 90s and the 2000s of metrosexuals, right? The guys want to go, just look prim, and prim and proper. So it's how they may want to express themselves. But identity is what we're born with. I knew that I was different when I was 5 years old. Now, this was before the internet. This was when I had to sneak into the school library trying to figure out what was going on. The only way I could try and figure out what it was when I read in 1973-74 about a tennis player called Rennie Richards. So if any of y'all are tennis players, you see I am a Texan, I can say you all as well. But there was a newspaper with Rennie Richards, and it said sex change tennis player. And my brain sort of said, wow, that strikes a bell for some reason, not quite sure what it is. But I couldn't tell my parents, I didn't know how to explain it. I grew up, went through puberty, hated it, because my girlfriends were going in one direction. My brain said I'm female, my body said no, you're male, so I went in a different direction. And then obviously, tried to be the macho guy and do all the things that I needed to do as a business executive, was the senior vice president, was flying on a corporate jet, was having a wonderful life. And I said, this is just not me. I'm covering up something that is so internal to me. That every one of my members of family, everybody that's around me, thinks that I'm this, and I'm not. So when I come to tell them that I'm not this person that you think I am, they're going to say, you've lied to me for all your life. So I kept every friend that I have, as if you were to close your fingers and just look like this, I kept every friend at this sort of length. So if you only have a little gap, I can make out colors. As I brought my friends closer to me, I could just see their faces. I was fearful about bringing them close because they would find out my true identity, and then I would lose my job. And so here in Texas, we have no workplace protections. You can fire me straight from my face and say, you're a transsexual, I'm firing you. Just as weakly as you can say that to a gay or lesbian person. From this bill perspective, it's about gender bias. So it's not just about protecting somebody like myself, who may look female but be big and be different. And certainly I am what they call post-operative. I have a wonderful life. I've been in a relationship now for 7 years. As I say, we've got a one-year-old daughter through the magic of a musician here in town that donated for us because I didn't save anything when I transitioned. But expression is also included in this. So this covers anybody that may look differently, act differently, have hand signals that are different, have a lisp, do something, or a butch woman or something like that, and somebody commits a crime against those individuals and says, I don't like you because of X. We need to have some recourse. Just 3 words that somebody says, I don't like you because of your religion. I don't like somebody because of the color of your skin or your heritage. We need to protect these people, just like myself, who unfortunately are a tiny minority here in the state of Texas, who some people will stand up against and say they're not worthy of protection. you'll have people who will probably come up and testify and say, I am against it because it's not good for Texas. I don't know why protecting anybody in this great state is not worthy of this bill consideration. Now, we've been here year after year asking for protections. And I get to stand up sometimes, normally on November 20th, which I'd invite any of your representatives to come down to any of what we call Transgender Day of Remembrance. And that's where we read out the names of every transgender person who has been murdered, not only in the state of Texas, but across the U.S. and across the world. It is the most moving experience as we read a name and ring a bell and remember those that we've lost. Because all too often, they're not classified as hate crimes. We can pretty much tell who they are, and then we lose that individual, and there's nothing else that we can do about it. Again, there are unsolved murders here in this state that I would view as being hate crimes.
Thank you for that. It does help.
Answer, I apologize.
No, thank you. You understood my question, and obviously a lot of matters we have to sort through, and it helps us a lot to understand exactly what those terms mean. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Other questions, members? Representative Leach.
Thank you again for being here tonight. Like Representative Hughes, I've just got a couple questions I want to ask. I do want you to understand how grateful we are that you're here. I know it takes a lot of courage to get up, and I disagree with a lot of what you've said and with the legislation, but I am really glad you're here because I do want to understand this issue better. So you've talked a lot about gender identity and expression. And I'm kind of known as the crazy hypothetical guy on this committee, I think, in terms of law school hypotheticals. And I want to ask you a hypothetical because I ultimately really want to know the answer. If a man believes he's a woman and is preoperative, you said you're postoperative, is preoperative. So if a man believes he's a woman, could he express himself by going into a woman's bathroom?
So, good question. I think that's also a current question for a lot of state legislators right now. As the representative mentioned, we have to carry papers, but we also have to be under medical care and supervision. So my personal view would be that if you're under medical supervision and super care, that you should be allowed, if you're dressing like this and you're looking like this and you're living, this is the key thing here, you're living 24/7 as this identity, that I should have full accommodations when it comes to public restrooms.
But it's preoperative, so you still have male anatomy.
Okay.
And you're in a woman's bathroom. I'm thinking about specifically high schoolers, our kids.
Sure.
You said you were 5 when you started the question or decided that you were a woman or whatever. I've got great concerns about the protection of our kids specifically. If a student in high school, a guy believes he's a woman, is preoperative, has male parts, and walks into the bathroom on a regular basis, or let's say wants to shower with the girls' volleyball team. My daughter on that volleyball team, I mean, can you understand how I might have an issue with that? And how the law might have an issue with that?
I have a 19-year-old daughter too. But let me put it this way, what is stopping them from doing that today?
Well, the signs on the doors?
That's not going to stop a guy going into a women's restroom.
Sure it is.
Not really.
Well, that guy's going to be pulled out, and he's probably going to be prosecuted for indecent exposure or other crimes if he's there in a woman's bathroom.
Probably after the fact of something occurring that they're going to be prosecuted, which they should be. But at the end of the day, if I'm going into a women's restroom, and I have used a women's restroom here for many years that I come to testify in the legislative body, who's checking me out? Why should I be, right? So I think the answer is really going to be along the lines of, if we can help educate you and bring in some therapists and people that are treating people like myself medically.
So the problem is me having an issue with that.
I think it is.
You're saying I am the one that needs a therapist.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about from education. I think the problem is that in most legislative bodies that I've worked with, and one of the ones was Connecticut a year ago. There was a very, very similar voice concern coming out from one of the representatives. And the reality is, if you are going into a restroom knowingly with the intent to expose yourself or to commit a crime, right, you shouldn't be allowed to say, well, it's my gender expression. If If you are being treated for gender identity and gender expression, you're being treated medically. It's not one of those things where somebody comes in and says, okay, check a list and you're done.
So, okay, let's take the shower, for instance. Let's take the showers for the high school volleyball team, because it's basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about protecting the boy in the women's bathroom. I'm worried about protecting my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want a man, not a woman, a man
Mm-hmm.
with anatomical male parts in a shower with my daughter in high school.
Understood.
And what you're saying is that should be allowed, that's gender expression.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that somebody that has a gender identity, a gender expression right now may have a different circumstances. There are kids in schools here in the state of Texas that are born genetically male and genetically female. They're currently enrolled into your school systems that are identifying as opposite birth gender. School systems have a way to deal with it. Now, that's not what this bill is about, and I'd be glad to spend more time with you all and actually talking about that.
Are you willing to say that in a high school shower situation that a person with male body parts should not be allowed in a female locker room?
No. What I'm saying is that schools
you
make
said no.
accommodations.
You said no.
Correct.
So you think that should be allowed?
No, I'm saying that they shouldn't be allowed. I'm not saying that they should be allowed in a high school shower system.
Okay, I misunderstood.
If you have male genitalia and you're identifying as female and you're going into a school locker system, my personal opinion is if you are naked, you shouldn't be in that locker system.
Okay.
However, what I am actually saying is that people that have gender identity and gender expression are diagnosed with it by doctors. We undergo treatment, right? So there is a context for all of this. Unfortunately, because of the price and the cost of a lot of this, there are people that probably are unable to afford surgery and go through it. But school systems, which is what you're talking about here, Representative, have already addressed this in many of their accommodations. This is, again, not part of this bill. This is about bias against this.
Okay. All right. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Toth.
And again, I'm not an attorney, not a criminal prosecutor or anything like that.
Representative, neither am I.
And thank you for being here. So hate crime, is this commonly referred to as hate crime legislation?
Correct, yes.
Is it a stiffer penalty? In other words, if someone beat me up just because they didn't like me, I'm short. If they beat me up, would it be less of a crime if they beat you up? I mean, I honestly don't.
So I'm not aware of again, I'm not a lawyer or a prosecutor myself, so you have to look to somebody else to see if this would actually put any more weighting onto an existing statute. I believe that statutes here in the state of Texas are tough enough as they are, but it will give some more prosecutorial investigation into the crime based off of somebody shouting, screaming, or saying, because you're trans, because you're this, because you're born a man, because you're something. I'm basically doing this crime. And that's what we're asking for. We added sexual orientation into it a couple of years ago. We now want to add gender identity and expression into it. But I don't have the direct answer because I'm not a...
Do you know? Yeah.
And maybe some of the other folks that are up here to testify, because we're a little bit out of order in my mind on where we enrolled for testifying, may have some answers for you as well.
Thank you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Sean.
Chair calls Daniel Williams with Equality Texas, wishing to come forward to testify for House Bill 3324.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Daniel Williams with Equality Texas, testifying for the bill. Representative Toth, to answer your question, height is not a protected attribute under the hate crime statute. However, it is important to note, as Representative Moody stated when he laid out the bill, that the attributes that are there are all universal attributes. In other words, race is not something that only African Americans have. Race is something everybody has. Nation of origin is not something that people from other countries have. It's something everybody has. I'm from the United States. Likewise, gender identity expression are universal attributes. Everybody has a gender identity. I'm male. I happen to be one of the people who's fortunate enough to have a gender identity that is in line with the gender I was assigned at birth and what everyone has told me my entire life I should be, as I believe are most of the members of the committee. Gender expression, my favorite way to describe gender expression to people is there's a sculpture of Stephen F. Austin in the South Lobby that was carved by a renowned artist named Elizabeth Ney. And in her day, Miss Ney was considered quite scandalous because she wore pants and she rode a horse astride. And at that time, that was something women simply did not do. That was masculine behavior. That was an expression of gender that was inappropriate for women, and it did cause quite a scandal at its time. That's what we mean when we talk about gender expression. It's the collection of behaviors that we think of as being male or think of as being female. Like race, like nation of origin, like gender, like religious belief, gender identity and gender expression are universal attributes. And we as Texans do want the motivations of criminals to play a part in their trials. Our courts do, as a matter of routine, make differentiations between assaults made in the heat of the moment and premeditated attacks, between deaths caused by negligence or neglect and ones motivated by malice. The intent of criminals is a fundamental part of our system of jurisprudence, and it's what separates us from more primitive systems that care only about the outcome of a crime before considering whether or not someone should have their hand cut off or be stoned. Gender identity expression is a universal attribute, and it has historically been the basis of widespread and systemic discrimination, similar to race and nation of origin and religious belief and gender. 17% of transgender Texans report becoming homeless because of their gender identity or expression. 46% of transgender students have been assaulted in school. 9% report being sexually assaulted. 16% report being denied medical care because of their gender identity expression. And speaking of the sexual assault of transgender students in school, I absolutely understand the concern of a father in the gym conditions in a school. I think it's an important question that needs to be considered. It's not directly addressed by this bill. But I would also encourage the members of the committee to flip that question and think about the high school student who is female, who was assigned a male identity at birth, whose anatomy is male, who is then forced to go shower with the other boys. And the position that that puts her in as a teenage girl being forced to shower with boys. I think there are reasonable accommodations that can be made in schools to ensure that all children are treated with respect and are in safe positions. Again, that's not an issue addressed directly by this bill. But I strongly encourage the committee to report favorably on this, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions, members? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Simon Stevens? Simone Stevens, representing yourself, wishing to come forward to testify for House Bill 3324. If you would, state your name, who you're representing, and what your position is with respect to House Bill 3324, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Simone Stevens. That is an AKA. I have a different name as well. I represent myself, and right now I feel like I'm at the bottom of the food chain, if you will. I am a private citizen. I'm here to speak on behalf of House Bill 3324 that I am in favor of. I'm sorry, I'm staring at you, Jeff. I don't mean to. I am a Texan, with an accent, by the way. I am an elderly citizen. I'm 76 years old. I'm not going to be in a shower with a teenager. I'm a retired former executive of a very large oil company. I am a veteran. I've served in the United States Armed Forces during the period 1957 through 1960. I'm not a spring chicken. I am the father of 4 children. 2 girls, 2 boys. They are all married. I have 8 grandchildren. I am really a threat, aren't I? I am also transgendered. Voila. I'm an individual who finds it necessary when walking the street to be quite aware of what's going on around me, because I know there are people out there who will harm me. I know that I am a target. I am also armed. I am a CHL. I'm armed for a purpose, to protect my life, which I feel is constantly in danger. I am trying to protect myself from being a victim of a hate crime. I have been threatened with physical harm in the past. I have been physically pushed around. I have been verbally abused in a public setting. I don't look like a guy, do I? But I am. I am not post-op. I am pre-op. I am under medical care. I am on HRT hormone therapy. I am married. My spouse is a female. That sometimes creates problems, by the way. 2 women in the same household don't work real well. I have been stalked and followed into parking lots. On occasion, I actually had to put my hand up and say, "Stop. Don't come any closer to me." The individual kept coming. So then I said, "Stop. I have a weapon, and I will use it if you make any further steps toward me." That person stopped. It saved my life as far as I'm concerned. I got into my car and I got the hell out of there as quickly as I could, because I was really, really frightened for my life. So I think you can appreciate why I am looking for protection, which every other American citizen receives and is entitled to. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I have had a very good life. I am not poor. I am not an indigent in the street. I also work in the clinic that Nell mentioned earlier, strictly working with transgendered people. I do intake, and I explain to them what the process is going to be as far as going through HRT treatment and so forth. So obviously I am very much in favor of this bill, and I would ask the committee to think favorably on this. If anybody has any questions, I'm glad to address them.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Leach.
I just wanted to say thanks for being here, and thank you for your service to our country as well. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other
I'm
questions?
sorry, I know it's late. I'm just as tired as you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Wanted to ask
Simone?
Simone,
Yes.
would you testify for my gun bill?
Certainly would. Absolutely.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for your service to our country.
Chair now calls Jonathan Saenz with Texas Values wishing to come forward to testify against House Bill 3324. If you would, sir, please state your name, who you're here representing, and what your position is with respect to House Bill 3324, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jonathan Saenz, and I'm the president of Texas Values. I'm also a constitutional lawyer. Excuse me. I'm here to testify against House Bill 3324. Our organization works on issues of faith, family, and freedom in the state of Texas. I have a number of concerns regarding this legislation. One of the main concerns is this subjective discussion of the words gender identity and expression. It's very important if we're going to have criminal laws for people to have the Sixth Amendment right to have some type of notice of why they're being prosecuted ahead of time. The words gender identity or expression, as far as I know, appear nowhere in our statutes. There's no definition of what that means. As a matter of fact, from the testimony that we've heard so far, you've heard transsexual, transgender, metrosexual, and even Wikipedia, if you want to rely on that as a resource of having some value to it, describes gender identity as a subjective term that a person identifies with privately. It could change from one person to another, from one day to another. What they believe their gender identity is. We don't have a workable standard in law in order to prosecute this type of issue, first of all. So that brings into it some constitutional concerns. I'm certain that you'll have these issues litigated because of this lack of depth to this effort, and there being nothing in it for prosecutors, defense attorneys, and folks that have to deal with this issue in the court. The other thing is, you look at gender identity and expression. You've also got some free speech issues there as well. If you've got folks that subjectively are identifying themselves as one way or another, and it has something to do with their expression, you're going to find yourself in a situation at some point where you have someone's expression rights against someone else's. And so I don't think that's the type of thing that we want to be prosecuting. And I think no matter how people feel about some of these issues, they feel very strongly about the First Amendment. I do also think we need to recall this bill deals with graffiti, criminal mischief, and arson. Those things should be against. Go ahead. I think I still got a little time, but I can take your question now, and I can finish up my comments. They're not about any of the crimes that you heard described earlier, but they still are against the law. And people being murdered and attacked are still against the law, and they should be. And I'll just conclude with one thing, and then I'll be happy to take questions, Representative Moody and others, that we don't have a workable definition on this issue. I don't think there really is a workable definition for people to rely on. But you have a situation where these things are already against the law, and now we're going to prosecute people even further. In the statute, this only shows Section A. Section B, which is not listed in this but comes after this, says the sentencing judge may, as a condition of punishment, require attendance in an educational program to further tolerance and acceptance of others. The Human Rights Campaign is here testifying in favor of this bill, but they have gone after and attacked the Boy Scouts of America for their moral position on these issues. Where is the tolerance there? And I conclude.
Thank you. Representative Moody.
Section B is permissive, correct? For the judge?
You're correct. It does say may.
Now, you said that there's First Amendment rights available here, correct?
Concerns?
In terms of someone expressing their opinion about...
No. In terms of...
You said there's First Amendment rights. You implicated the First Amendment.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
what way?
People have First Amendment rights.
You have a First Amendment right to commit crime against people?
No,
That's
to
what this bill
express
is
yourself.
Express yourself. Let's go in Title V. That's what we're talking about here.
Right.
And then some other ones. So
Right.
you have a First Amendment right to express yourself through murdering someone? Is that your
Well,
position?
I don't think I said that.
You said that you get to express yourself. What this bill
No.
is talking about doing,
Go ahead.
what this bill is talking about doing, is not getting lost over here, but looking at the intent of the actor. We have motive. Breakouts in our law already. We've
Right.
done this in our law already.
For
We do
some
it in other categories. I do not believe that now people want to express their views and don't want to support or don't want to come and want to lend their lend their support or their vote to something because they feel like it conflicts with their beliefs. I think they have the full right to do that. They do not have the full right to commit these offenses. And I think proving the graffiti one would be maybe the easiest one of all. Someone spray paints someone's property that says tranny on it. Do you think it's hard to tell what the motivation behind that crime was?
What? I didn't hear the word you used.
The derogatory term for transgender people.
Okay. I've never heard that word. I apologize.
Okay, I'm just saying, don't you think it'd be easy to tell the motivation in that circumstance?
I think you make a good argument that it could be.
This bill, you brought up a lot of concerns, and this bill
But this bill is going...
This bill
Go
is
ahead.
5 words.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you want to work on definition, I think that's great. And this isn't my bill. I'm presenting it for Representative Coleman.
I understand
I
that.
do feel very strongly about this.
I understand that.
This is about what motivates people to commit crime. People that are transgendered are 28% more likely to be the victim of violent crime than any one of the rest of us that doesn't identify like that.
I haven't seen that data.
Okay, well, I can get that report to you. These are important things, and I said like.
I don't disagree with.
Hold on, Mr. Saenz, please. I need to make sure that there's a back and forth,
Sure.
not an
Well,
interruption.
And I'll visit.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just want to be very clear. These types of activities in Title V and in the Penal Code 2802, 2803, and 2808, which is what this statute covers,
Right.
I do not believe you have a First Amendment expression right to do these things.
The part of the First Amendment, my comments on the First Amendment were the actual words that you're using as your standard for bias or prejudice as it's stated in the statute. It's based upon someone subjectively saying, I express myself this way or that way regarding their gender or possible sexuality issues. How does the other person, the rest of us, know what that expression means? One of the persons.
That's the point of the bill. It's the motive of the actor, not the identity or how someone defines or who they are.
It is about that.
No, it is about the motive of the actor to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that was the motive for why they committed the offense under these codes.
And
so we're not trying to get after a definition. We heard a very good conversation about what those things mean. You're trying to get after the motive of the crime. Now, if you don't think that's something we should do in our law, that's another position. That's fine. I respect that.
I understand.
But the ability of us to have a good conversation about this, I don't think we need to. We don't need to include that. These types of activities are not protected. They're not constitutionally protected. They're against the law now.
I agree with you.
Okay. So
They should be.
And this bill seeks to add 5 words to our hate crime statute that is focused on the motive of the actor and not how someone is.
I disagree with you there.
Okay, well that's what the bill does.
No, but that's not what it says.
Statute does, and
But that's not what it says.
Okay, well then we disagree.
Representative, hold on. Go ahead, Mr.
I just want to
Saenz.
explain why.
I know, and I'm asking you to please respond to his comments.
Yeah.
And if you disagree, then do it in a respectful way and point out the
Absolutely.
reasons why, please.
And Representative Moody, do you feel like I'm being disrespectful?
No.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're good there. Okay. And I'm not saying you were suggesting that. I just want to make sure we're still in good shape. Okay. So what I'm saying is this. The gender identity and expression words that are here are subjective. The person that says this crime, and first of all, I don't know, I mean, we have to look and see if actually graffiti and arson and criminal mischief are not, the way they're defined in the statute, we're not just talking about property crimes and not actually crimes against a person. But let's just assume they are, okay, just for this discussion, because I'm sure they would like to extend that to all criminal laws, okay? So for, nonetheless, it's about the person that says these things are happening to them or they were targeted. They're saying it's based on some subjective standard of how they express themselves. The word expression is in this statute, or in this proposed bill. Okay, that could be symbolic, that could be words they use, that could be something they're wearing. It's an expression from them. But that does not mean that the person that is accused of committing a crime is aware of what they intended to express. Are you with me? That they may say, they came at me because of this, where the offender may be thinking, I had no idea that's what they were actually trying to express. My concern is partly about this standard being abused and not working the way that some of us may think that it should work. And so that is a concern I have. And when we do talk about the way people express themselves, we get into the business of prosecuting people for free speech issues. And we have to tread very carefully when we get into those issues, because we may disagree on issues of gender identity and transgender and metrosexual and all these different issues about sexual behavior. But we're going to have discussions sometimes and people are going to disagree. And I don't want to have an enhanced issue or more prosecution because of people simply disagree with someone's sexual activity. And how do we not know that you'll have someone that they choose to express themselves and their gender identity by making a pass at somebody else that is not asking for that, or being overly sexual in public? They may feel like that's the way they express their gender. And we know it happens. We know it happens in gay pride parades and all these different things where you see a lot of over-the-top behavior. And so I don't think that it's necessary for us to be trying to protect those type of issues. And when we talk about criminal prosecution and separating out a new section class of people that we don't even really know what the definition is, and they can define it themselves.
Representative Moody.
Okay.
Did I make any good points?
Well, not really, but
Did I explain my position better to you?
I believe you did, and that's,
Thank you.
And I understand where you're coming from. I'm telling you that as someone who has actually looked at these cases, you are looking at the motivation. When you're saying that if I didn't, well, I attacked that person, but it had nothing to do with whatever this other deal was, then that's not covered here. Look, I mean, we read just the basic of the statute. Determines, the judge, jury, whoever, trier fact, determines beyond a reasonable doubt. So they have to make an affirmative finding beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant intentionally selected the person against whom the offense was committed. So they have to show that it is from the actor's perspective. So if the actor is acting in a way that is not related to these, however you want to define them, if they're not related to these protected classes in the jury law,
right? If
the jury or judge, depending on who's trier fact, if they don't find that beyond a reasonable doubt, then this doesn't apply.
Right. And so
it is based on the intent of the actor, not how someone is. So, like, if you get a lynch, let me give you an example. So a lynch mob gets together. Lynch mob gets together and they want to lynch someone who's African American, and that is their motivation, and that is what they want to do. And let's say they walk down the street and they find the closest person. They see someone, and guess what? That person ends up being Samoan, not African American. Does that make it less of a hate crime?
I wouldn't think so.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah.
Mr. Saenz.
But I don't agree with your point. We cover race here.
I think it's obvious that y'all disagree.
And part of the problem is it is obvious. We disagree. But what I want to make sure I'm clear on is if you're going to create a new special section class of people on this, we better be very clear about what we're talking about. And we don't have any clear definition because it's a subjective definition. That person individually can decide if they're expressing themselves or they're identifying as a certain gender. And that is a major problem with this issue, and that's why anytime, particularly in the state of Texas and other places across the country, when this type of language is introduced, it always causes problems and conflict, and it's difficult for it to move forward. And rightly so, I believe, we have to be careful. It took a long time to put some of these different categories in here, and a lot of these categories were discriminated and treated wrongly for years and decades, a long time, and these are issues that we have looked at for a long time. Okay? The gender identity issues, a lot of people don't really know what it means. Some people think they do, and they get to be subjective about how it's defined. That is, I think, just right for many problems in criminal law and constitutional law, and that's one of the many reasons why we have concerns and would object to it. And so, but I do want to just say this last thing, and I hope that you and I can talk at another point, and maybe you might see it somewhat my way. But when you talk about people, yeah, I wouldn't. We'll do it another time.
I'm
sorry.
Please make your final point if there is a final point.
I appreciate the discussion. And
there's other questions.
Go ahead.
Representative Burnam.
Thank you, Mr. Saenz. You represent, is that right? Did I say?
Saenz.
Saenz, Mr. Saenz.
Yeah.
You're representing Texas Values, correct?
That's correct.
How long have you been with Texas Values?
We have started since roughly October of last year, and before that, I was the legislative director for Liberty Institute since about roughly 2007, and Texas Values is operating under Liberty Institute.
So Texas Values was not in existence when we passed the original hate crime legislation?
That is correct.
Okay, but you do understand, don't you, that it's not really a separate charge. It's simply an enhancement for the other crimes that you've been discussing back and forth.
I do realize that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Schaefer.
I think your point is that race is an objective thing that can be determined, whereas gender expression is subjective.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions, members? Thank you, Mr. Saenz.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to come forward to testify for, on, or against House Bill 3324? If not, let the record reflect that the following individuals have registered for the bill but do not wish to come forward to testify. Those would include Kevin Aragla, representing themselves, Chuck Smith with Equality Texas, Stephen Ties with the Bexar County Criminal District Attorney's Office. The following individual registered on but does not wish to come forward to testify. That is N.J. Smith, representing themselves. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward to testify for, on, or against House Bill 3324, or wishes to come forward and register for, on, or against House Bill 3324 without testifying? If not, at this time the Chair recognizes Representative Moody to close on Chairman Coleman's bill.
Close on somebody else's bill, yeah. No, I want to thank the committee. I know it's late, and Mr. Saenz, I hope that I wasn't, you don't assume that I was, being disrespectful to you. This is an issue that I do care a lot about. I know you care a lot about it as well, and so I'm sure we'll be able to continue these conversations otherwise. But to clear up one issue that Representative Toth brought up, so in terms of ratcheting up penalties, so in these code provisions you'd go C to a B, B to an A. A would not go to a state jail. It would have a mandatory minimum, but that could still be probated. A state jail would go to a third go to a second go to first. First does not, obviously, can't go up to Kevin or whatever the next level. So that's the way that this works. And then there's the affirmative finding, and then the section B, which is talking about the class that is permissive that the judge can order. So that's how it works. All right, and I close.
Questions, members? If not, at this time the Chair leaves House Bill 3324 by Chairman Coleman pending. As